Hello, we're Minie, Sena, and Amy Kim. Today we're going to be contrasting and comparing about characteristic, perspective, and the theme of the Plymouth Plantation, coming of age in the Dawnland, and the Tempest. Today in this video we're going to talk about the theme, characters, and the perspective respectfully. First of all, the theme. The main theme that is implied in all three stories is colonization and power. However, even though all three stories are told with the same theme, the source that grants power to people are slightly different. In Of Plymouth Plantation, Bradford uses God as the source of power, and he explains of how Europeans had colonized the Pilgrims, and the act of colonization in the story is viewed as a divine and holy action, the action done by the will of God. Such theme of God and colonization can be better understood by Bradford's use of this quote, having undertaken for the glory of God and advancement of the Christian faith and honor of our king and country. Such a quote once again highlights that the Europeans were the ones in power and that they had used God as a source to justify their action and grant them power, and also justify their action of colonizing the pilgrims. In the coming of age in the Dawnland, the bravery and honest characteristics served as the main source that granted pilgrims their power. Within the story, Charles C. Mann described how kids from the age 7 were thought to be old enough and were trained to be brave and steadfast. Line 182 to 184 best describes the situation. The primary goal of the Donlan education was molding character. Men and women were expected to be brave, hardy, honest, and uncomplaining. Moreover, one unique thing about the theme of colonization and coming of age in the Donlan is that colonization is not directly stated within the historical account, but instead, it indirectly implies the theme of colonization. It foreshadows the European colonization of the Pilgrims. Such foreshadowing can be best shown in the line 143 to 149. Nor did the English regard the Donlan Watu as primitives. Its multiple layers of mass, which trapped insulating layers of air, were warmer than our English houses. And the Watu less leaky than the typical English wattle and daub house, too. Wood did not conceal his admiration for the way an Indian mats. The following lines show that the Europeans had slowly started to gain interest in the Pilgrims' land and their architectures, and that in the future they will likely colonize the Pilgrims. Within the Tempest, Shakespeare uses magical powers as the source that grant people their authority. Throughout the play, starting from Act 1, Scene 2, Shakespeare explains how Prospero had used his magical powers to control nature and sink the ship, and how he had also colonized the Caliban Island using the powers he had. In line 1 to 2, it is written, "If by your art, my dearest father, you have put the wild waters in this roar, allay them." Within this quote, my dearest father is referencing Prospero, and the quote overly indicates that Prospero had caused chaos in the sea, explaining that Prospero had eventually gained control over the sea and the nature. Moreover, the colonizing of the Caliban Island, Prospero using his power to colonize the Caliban Island, and by colonizing the Caliban Island, gaining control of the indigenous people, reminds us of how, within the Plymouth Plantation, the Europeans had gained control over the Pilgrim by colonizing their land.
In this slide, I'll be explaining about the list of characters from the three stories. In the Plymouth Plantation, William Bradford and Pilgrims comes in. We see that William Bradford is the leader of the Pilgrims and the author of the story. He's the main character that represents the determinations and faith of the settlers. The groups of English travelers who goes to the New World seeking religious freedom are the Pilgrims. They face many hardships and challenges, however during the travel they lean towards religious belief and goes on their journey. Next is coming of age in the Dawnland. There is Squanto, the Native American. He is the negotiator between the Native Americans and European settlers. He has a knowledge, is a brain character understanding the Native and European cultures. He helped them with navigate the changing world. There are Native people who are Native Americans, civilizations before European colonizations. They have a connection with the land and the societies and the opposing culture to European viewing them. Lastly, there is the Tempest. There is first character Prospero, who is the former Duke of Milan, powerful magician who controls the land and its inhabitants. His goal is to get his power. Caliban is the native of the island. He is enslaved by Prospero. Caliban is a representative of Prospero's control and oppressed indigenous populations. Number three is Ariel. He is also enslaved by Prospero, helps carry his magical plans, wish for freedom. Lastly, there is Miranda, who is the Prospero's daughter. She's innocent and aware of Prospero's plan. To look at the differences in the characters of these three stories, firstly, let's look at the Philosopher's Plantation. The main characters are the Pilgrims led by William Bradford. They are motivated by their faith and their desire for religious freedom. They believe the new world is the place where they can be started fresh. But they face many challenges, including difficult conditions, troubles with the Native Americans. The Pilgrims are portrayed as a hardworking people that rely on to their faith, which is a religion, to survive. For coming off the land in the Dawnland, Tisquantum represent Native Americans who were already living in the Americas before Europeans arrived. Tisquantins is smart, resourceful, and able to navigate both native and European societies. Unlike the pilgrims who came to conquer the land, Tisquantin and his people live in harmony with it, showing a deep understanding of their environment. For Tempest, Prospero is a powerful figure who uses magic to control the island and its inhabitants. Unlike the Pilgrims and the Tisquantum, Prospero's story is more about personal powers and revenge. He rules the island with the iron fist. The Caliban, the native of the island, resent being controlled. This reflects the relationship between colonizations and colonized, with Prospero acting as the colonizer and Caliban as the oppressed native. Despite their differences, the characters in this story share some important similarities. All of them face the challenge of surviving in new or unfamiliar environments. The pilgrim must figure out how to live in a harsh condition of the new world. Tisquantin must survive in a world that is being changed by European colonizations. Caliban must live under the control of Prospero, who has taken over his island. The characters in the three stories may come from a different time place, however, they all share common themes. They each struggle to survive in a new environment, deal with issues of power and control throughout the stories, while the programs are focused on survival through faith. Tisquantin shows the faith and wisdom of Native Americans, and Prospero's story is one of personal power and revenge. These characters show how human goes through harsh situations, troubles, and begin to believe in religion.
Next is about their perspectives. Bradford's of Plymouth Plantation, Man's Coming of Age in the Dawnland, and Shakespeare's The Tempest. Each of these texts explores the complicated effects of colonization and how it changes society, highlighting the hardship and trials faced by the characters. First, let's look at Bradford's of Plymouth Plantation. Bradford presents colonization from a positive perspective. He emphasizes that the challenges faced by the pilgrims were part of the God's plan. For instance, in chapter 10, he writes that so they committed themselves to the will of God and resolved to proceed. This quote illustrates the pilgrims' belief that their journey to the new world was the mission given by the God and aimed at creating a faith-based society. Bradford also emphasizes the blessing they received during the difficult times. He states that the Lord is never wanting to his in the greatest needs. Let his holy name have all the praises. Here, he highlights that the pilgrim's survival during their tough voyage and the harsh winter was a miraculous sign of the God's grace. Man's coming of age in the Dawnland takes a different approach, focusing on negative impacts of colonization, especially a suffering of indigenous people. He discusses how disease brought by European devastated these communities. For example, he mentions 16th century New England housed 100,000 people or more, a figure that was slowly increasing. Most of those people lived in shoreline communities where rising numbers were beginning to change agriculture from an option to necessity. This bigger settlement required more centralized administration, now needed to be managed. This code shows that how disease reduced their population. Mans explains that the introduction of European disease, such as smallpox, leads to a collapse of social structure among indigenous communities. He writes that, but the world outside, as Thomas put it, was the maze of confusing action and independence fighting to maintain existence in the shadow of change. This reflects how the arrival of European settlers not only brought disease but also disrupted traditional way of life. Finally, turning into Shakespeare's The Tempest, in this play, Shakespeare examined power dynamic and personal relationship within the colonial context. A powerful quote from Prospero is when he says, "You stand on an evil mother, the devil captures slave of poison, come out." Here, Prospero refers to Caliban as a poisoned slave, implying that he sees Caliban as inherently evil. This dehumanization shows how people in power often see those who are weaker as less important. In conclusion, Breath Force of Clement Plantation discusses suffering within divine framework, while man's coming of age in the Dawnland highlights the harsh realities faced by indigenous people. Meanwhile, Shakespeare's The Tempest delves into moral complexity of power in colonial relationships. Together, these works help us understand the many impacts of colonization on individual and society.